My name is Miss Lizzie. I don't ever smoke the dizzy, but we can always share some ditzies. It's just a cup in time. This song doesn't have to rhyme. Life's all of us, not every moment we can be feeling fine. I wanna share a moment, just a second if you will, maybe even a cup of thrill. We could share this performance. It's tea time, come sit with me.
Welcome, guys. Miss Liz in the house, and we have an incredible guest in the background. We have Leslie Davenport in the house. We're going to talk about climate anxiety. So we're get ready for a nice strong cup of tea. And her tea today is feel, understand, and act. And we'll get a little deeper into those three words as we share this tea time this afternoon. But before we get started, you guys know how Miss Liz rolls. Get over to all those platforms: Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, Instagram, Alignable, Lemonade, Clapper, all those good platforms. Give those a like, follow, and subscribe. If you notice the guests are on those platforms as well, give them a follow and support their services and books and all that. That's how we make a difference with Tea Time. Also, jump over to the podcast apps: Podbean, iHeartRadio, Listen Notes, Deezer, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all those good ones, and give those a like, follow, and subscribe as well. And if I haven't mentioned one, Miss Liz is on all of them. Just give that a quick like, subscribe, and follow, and get these Tea Times out there because they do make a difference for the guest and for listening audience that resonate with the topics. Also, jump over to babyboomers.org. Miss Liz has been partnered with them for about 4 years. If you're looking to be featured on different podcasts, they have over 50 plus podcast shows over there, and they're always looking for incredible guests. So you can pitch them over there as well. So babyboomers.org, give them a like, follow, subscribe as well. Now let's get into the disclaimer and then a beautiful intro. And then we're going to get Leslie in here. We're going to spill some tea and have some fun with all of you guys. Disclaimer for Miss Liz's Tea Time live show. Miss Liz's Tea Time is a global platform dedicating to sharing real life stories, diverse perspectives, and meaningful conversations that inspire awareness, healing, and connection. I'm Miss Liz is going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment during the live broadcast, please grant StreamYard permission to display your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that all the content brought forward during any Tea Time show is presented in good faith. However, discussions may include opinions, beliefs, and perspectives that do not necessarily represent the views of Miss Liz or the Tea Time platform. Information shared by guests is based on their own experiences and is perceived to be accurate at the giving time of airing. All guests, viewers, and participants are responsible for using their own good judgment when considering any action or decision that may relate to these discussions. Some episodes may cover sensitive topics, including but not limited to trauma, abuse, grief, mental health, and other emotionally triggering subjects. Listeners' and viewers' discretion is strongly advised. Tea Time with Miss Liz is an open discussion forum designed to offer insight, inspire awareness, and create connection. It is not a substitute for professional, medical, legal, or therapeutical advice. If you require professional support, please seek assistance from qualified professionals or trusted resources in your area. If you have any questions regarding this disclaimer or the content of the discussion, you're welcome to contact me, aka Miss Liz, directly at my email at bookingmissliz@gmail.com or visit my link tree, Miss Liz's Tea Time. By choosing to participate in, comment on, or view these live shows, you acknowledge and accept this disclaimer. Your participation is entirely voluntary. I, Miss Liz, welcomes you to join the conversation with an open heart, and if at any time you feel this platform is not right for you, I respect your wishes and decision and welcome you back whenever you're ready. Tea Time with Miss Liz is serving truth and awareness one cup at a time. Well, welcome to Tea Time with Miss Liz, where every conversation creates space for truth, compassion, healing, and the courage to face what matters most. Today, we are honored to welcome Leslie Davenport, climate psychology educator, therapist, consultant, speaker, and author of Transforming Climate Anxiety. As concerned about climate change continues to affect individuals, families, educators, and communities, many people are carrying emotions that they may not know how to name. Fear, grief, anger, helplessness, uncertainty, and exhaustion can become overwhelming when the challenges feel larger than any one person. Leslie work helps people understand that these emotional responses are not signs of weakness, they are naturally about the future. Rather than asking people to ignore their feelings or become trapped inside them, Leslie offers tools that help transform anxiety into resilience, clarity, meaningful connections, and purposeful actions. Her approach brings together psychology, emotional wellness, mindfulness, creativity, and climate awareness. She reminds us that caring for the planet also requires caring for the hearts and minds of the people trying to protect it. Today, we'll explore understanding climate anxiety and ecological grief, supporting children and families through environmental uncertainty, moving from fear and overwhelm towards resilience, the relationship between emotional health and climate action, creating meaningful change without burning ourselves out, and how one person's courage can inspire collective action. Leslie reminds us that we do not need to choose between feeling deeply and acting effectively. Our emotions can become part of the wisdom that guides us forward. So grab your favorite cup and join us for a compassionate, empowering conversation filled with awareness, resilience, hope, action, and real life tea, truth, experience, and awareness. Let me get Leslie in here and let's spill some tea and have some fun. Welcome, Leslie.
Thank you so much. And thanks for having this platform, this opportunity to have these conversations.
Leslie, yeah, welcome. I didn't hear the first thing you said because my ears topped out again. So,
just that how appreciative I am of creating this platform and this opportunity to explore these topics together.
well, thank you so much for joining me today on Tea Time. And like I said before we went live, this is the first time I've had this conversation on Tea Time. So I always like to bring something new to the table so my listeners can have different perspectives and different topics to listen to. So, Leslie, before we get into your book and into the work that you do, tell us a little bit about who Leslie was as a little girl and who Leslie is now.
Oh boy. How much time do we have now?
We got a whole hour.
Well, going way back, I've always been curious and interested in the world around me. I'm one of those kids who is just as happy with my nose in a book as barefoot in the garden looking for bugs, especially when I was young. And so while I haven't done any formal training in environmental sciences, it's just been a lifelong learning interest of mine. And I think it's that curiosity, kind of listening to the world around us that has informed me pretty deeply, as well as my more formal educational direction. So I will say that on my professional track, before I was doing what I'm doing now, my very first career was as a modern dancer. I actually have a master's degree in dance. And I like to mention it because I don't do that anymore, but I feel as though all those years involved in creativity and imagination and expression continue to be important parts of how we embrace our full humanity. We don't have to be artists, but we all have creative capacities. And when it comes to solving something as complex as a warming world, I think we really need to include our imaginative capacities.
And I'm glad that you brought up the dance because, it has a lot to do with what you're doing as well, right? People will look at the dance as not connected, but it is connected because the flow and the energies and the connection of the science of the earth and climate and all that as well, right?
100%. And I feel like we need to strike that balance between listening to our own hearts, our own intuition, along with science and evolving knowledge and all of it. So we don't want to lose our humanity in the process of looking at this.
Oh, I think, today we're really going to have a good cup of tea. I can feel it.
Good, me too.
Well, we have a question that just came in from Antonio, and it is, what first inspired Leslie to specialize in climate psychology?
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that because it's honestly a question I get a lot. Not only what is climate psychology, but how'd you get into this? So, as I was saying, I've always had this interest in the natural world and ecology. And, probably probably 20 years ago. It wasn't a singular experience, but between documentaries and reading reports and books and articles and my own curiosity, I had a kind of climate wake-up moment where I felt like I really understood very deeply the severity of what we're changing, how important it is, how urgent it is. And I was already a licensed therapist, and I had been working at the time when this occurred in a hospital in health psychology. And I was working with a lot of people who were really facing life-threatening circumstances. They were getting good medical treatment, but the outcome wasn't always clear. And there was, I'm mentioning this because it became a little bit of a model for how I have developed climate psychology. Again, it's a very interdisciplinary look at what is the best in science, the best in research, the best in technology. How does it blend with our own mind-body healing capacities, our own engagement in our healing work? And I was fortunate. This is a hospital in San Francisco, California, and it's still going. I helped create a program called the Institute for Health and Healing that really was willing to embrace this kind of an approach. So when I had this climate awakening moment, I wanted to take what I'd been doing and translate it to how to serve the climate, because some people call it an existential crisis. We don't know quite what the outcome is going to be. There's a high level of threat. We need our technology, but we need more than that. And so I thought, well, how can I be the most effective? I want to shift gears and really devote my life to this. And I did what a lot of people do when they wake up to the climate realities. You know, I signed petitions, and I still do some of this. I joined a clean air initiative in my community to bring some policies in place. But I thought, well, you know, I've sort of have this platform already in therapy, and it's where I want to keep working. And I realized that the things we're trained in, like helping people move through denial, supporting lifestyle changes, facilitating conversations so they're not contentious if they're polarized, processing deep emotions, had this place that wasn't really being talked about yet.
Yeah.
And again, I don't view it as, you know, the cure-all, but how to plug it into that interdisciplinary model. And I already had a couple of books out on health psychology, so I approached one of my publishers and said, you know, I've got this idea. I think it's coming. Therapists are going to need to know how to work with people whose homes have been affected by flood or fire, or people are dealing with wildfire smoke, or whatever it may be. And our field is not trained or equipped in how to do this. So let me share the insights I've been coming to understand and kind of get us started. And that book came out in 2017. It was called Emotional Resiliency in the Era of Climate Change. And because that was at the very start of people beginning to recognize there is an important place for this, terms like eco-anxiety started being used, I suddenly was sort of an expert because not many people were talking about this. So I was pulled into organizations and schools who were starting to introduce climate science, but wanted to also give social emotional support to kids who were learning about melting sea ice and how it's affecting the polar bears, and not just leave them with facts, but what do we do? How can we be part of change, and what do we do with the feelings that it triggers? So once that book came out, I was just fully launched, and it's taken me in a number of directions, including 3 additional books from the time that one came out, some for kids, some for adults.
Oh, I'm glad that you have some for kids, you know, because,
yes.
You know, when people hear climate change, right away, they turn their nose away, or they're like, oh, this is just a hoax and stuff like that. But there's so much trauma that is based around climate and Mother Nature, like you said, like floods, fires. that people don't understand the grief and loss of that. Like if you lose your home from a fire or a flood, like that's a grief. That's a huge loss.
That's huge. And it's layered losses, right? A sense of security, the actual home, big decisions about should I rebuild in the same area? Should I leave? I mean, it really reaches far.
I am so glad that you found me, Leslie, because this is a topic that I have not had on Tea Time. And
Yeah.
I think it's time that we do start talking and having this open heart conversation about climate,
Yes.
you
Thank you
know?
too. And even I'll mention just the value of talking about it. There's so many benefits to that. In fact, Catherine Hayhoe, who's a really well-known climate scientist, says one of the best things we can do is have these conversations, because some people live with this privately in fear, afraid to bring it up, don't know what to do with their thoughts and feelings, don't know how to be involved. So like you said, sometimes just walk away, not always even out of lack of caring, but just feeling at a loss of,
Yeah.
well, what can I do?
Yeah. We have a couple of questions coming in. I'd just like to get those out to you. And then I want to get deeper into the book that we have as well. The first one that came in is from Bob is how can everyday people begin building emotional resilience during uncertain times?
Love that question. And it's right in my wheelhouse. So, well, part of the good news is that many of the emotional resilience tools that are already out there apply to this. In other words, there's a wide array of tools for how to calm our nervous systems, how to work with thoughts that are just spinning and reeling, um, including things like, some people like the more reflective approaches like yoga, breath work, meditation. Those are proven and research based. But I always encourage people, and I can help people do this if they're not sure how, to find the combination, their own toolkit that works for them, because someone might be happy to close their eyes and sit still, and another person would feel really restless and would do better to go run for 20 minutes and feel like they really moved the energy and then could settle a little more. Some of it's simple stuff, reaching out to friends. We're talking about the importance of this conversation, and I don't remember the exact statistics. I could get it to you, but it's certainly more than half in the US carry some level of distress about this on some level. And it's something like 20% who talk about it. So there's this really big gap between what we're feeling or worried about or thinking about, at least some of the time, and having an outlet to talk about it, and just connecting with like-minded friends, colleagues, an environmental organization is really relieving. And it also helps us realize, this is a collective problem and the solutions need to be collective. We all will have a part to play, but it also helps with the isolation, like it rests on our own shoulders.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Leslie, do you work with people that have seasonal depression? Because that has to do with the climate as well, right? The different temperatures, the different sunlight and darkness and all that.
Yes. And of course, different geographic areas are affected differently. I'm currently living in the Pacific Northwest near Seattle. So we get those long gray, not always a lot of rain, but gray months. Yeah. And again, I think the solutions really vary. There are technological solutions, like there are types of lamps you can use that provide a type of full spectrum light that can help our bodies get what they need. Sometimes it's as simple as needing to up our vitamin D because that comes from the sunlight. And yeah. And then also just whatever the cause of feeling like we're in a slump, some of those other things we've talked about are just helpful. Turn on music, connect with people, sometimes to nudge ourselves into a fun activity, even if we don't feel like it at the beginning, kind of shifts things for us. So yeah, lots of just simple tips and tricks.
Leslie, I do a lot of grounding with my feet in the grass
Yes,
and
wonderful.
in the water and in the sand, the different textures. Have you noticed over the years that the textures are almost heavy, like a metal?
Mm. Hmm. That's not something I've necessarily noticed, but now I'm curious. Maybe you can say a little more.
Well, I'm noticing when I'm standing in the grass, my feet are being pulled heavier. And when
Hmm.
I'm standing in the sand, it's almost like quicksand. And when you go into the water, it feels like I don't know if it's the energy or the metals or the
Yeah,
climate. Like I've noticed that in the last 2 years. I
interesting. Yeah, that's a really interesting area. Not one I'm so familiar with, but I'm curious about it.
well, I'm
But
just wondering because the greenery, right, where we live in, where I live in Canada, we're cutting
okay.
down so much trees, right? So we're
Mhm.
putting in all of this concrete and pavement and stuff into the buildings and that, right?
Yeah.
So we're putting all these minerals. Do you feel like that's taken away from the climate as well?
Well, we certainly know things like, and this applies a lot in urban areas, but it's certainly across the board, that the more greenery there is, shade and all of that, it actually helps lower the temperature of the area. It's one of the kind of resiliency tools that a lot of urban areas are trying to do is to increase the number of trees. And I will mention to do so in with a social justice lens so that the areas that really need it the most get prioritized because that doesn't always happen. Um, but also just talking about grounding and kicking off your shoes, it's such a good reminder because a lot of our work keeps us indoors, keeps us on screens, and there's a term, it's not like an official diagnosis, but people are talking about nature deficit disorder. Just having lost touch with those natural rhythms, slowing down as the light changes rather than watching a clock and flipping a switch, right? And those things that, oh, yeah, affect our nervous system, affect our mood, affect our health, affect our well-being, and affect our you know it's built into us that the things that we love and care about are the things we're drawn to protect, right? So to do things uh, to support the earth, to save what we can, to work in conservation efforts, there needs to be some level of connection there for that to feel like a natural impulse, to feel that empathy and desire to be part of change.
Absolutely. The next question that came in is from Jeffrey, and it's what inspired you to write Emotional Resiliency in the era of climate change?
Yes. Well, I don't know if you heard my whole introduction to that, but when I became really aware personally of what we're facing with climate change, I, like a lot of people, I kind of wanted to shout it from the rooftops, but then I wanted to do so in the most effective way. So that book was written for the mental health field, and I started by wanting to share with my colleagues the tools we have and how they can be applied to this growing need. Because one thing I'll mention now that we may get into more later is another question I often am asked is, well, what can I do? I'm not a scientist, I'm not a millionaire, I'm not a whatever people think it takes to be the change. But the truth is that absolutely every field, absolutely every endeavor needs to kind of redefine itself through a sustainability lens, right? So I started with my own sphere of influence and my own profession of what can we do? And, if someone's a school teacher, there's so much there in terms of educating and supporting kids. I know schools that start after school green clubs or do some kind of, poster educational assembly about things or get involved in partnering with their community on something. Or someone in the medical field, I know, started a waste reduction initiative. I mean, I cannot think of a single focus that wouldn't have a place to participate, a parent, a grandparent, to offer support or resources or a listening ear. Because we don't know how far our impact is going to ripple out. You know, sometimes when I'm just in my therapist role and I'm meeting one-on-one in a quiet room and no one else can hear, I sometimes think, well, gee, my reach isn't far enough. I need to, expand my platform. But I will tell the story of someone I worked with in therapy who is quite prominent in the climate world, but who actually had a speaking phobia and was sort of terrified of the larger stages that he was invited onto. So even though I wasn't the one in front of the microphone, the fact that I could help him become more comfortable and to work through that, that's one of the ways that I had an influence that's sort of indirect, but was really impactful. And I think we all have roles like that to play as well.
We all have to do our part. And like you said, we don't have to be millionaires. We don't have to be some special celebrity or something, just make a difference in our choices that we make each and every day as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, the next question that came in is from Real Estate Kate. What are the most common emotions people share with you about climate change?
Yeah. Well, there is a wonderful resource I'll mention, and then I'll answer that question directly, called the Climate Emotions Wheel. And it's available for free online through the Climate Mental Health Network's website. And it's available in something like 20 languages. Downloadable, people can use it for educational tools. And it sort of fans out just the broad range of emotions that people have, but it's in 4 categories. So one has to do with sadness and the many flavors of grief. It goes from sadness to despair. I mean, there's a pretty broad range there. One is fear, anxiety, what's going to happen to us? What can I do? Where should I live? Can I help my children? And one is anger. Like, there's a lot of injustice. Why can't the people in power who must have some knowledge about this be making the right decisions? And then the fourth one is one that's a little more hopeful. How good it feels to connect with other people who are doing this work too. Or in spite of the challenges, I'm also tracking some real progress, which is true as well in terms of green energy, renewable energy progress. And one thing that's so helpful about that tool is it's very normalizing. Sometimes I'll have it at a conference and I'll put it up on the screen, or I'll pass it out at the tables of 6 or 8 and just ask people to share with each other what they relate to on there. And boy, do people start talking, because it's like, oh, I recognize that. Oh, you do too. And sometimes I'm over here, and then the next day I'm over here. And it just makes it have so much sense, because we're built, our nervous systems and our hearts and our minds are built to respond emotionally to threat, to loss, to harms, right? To all the things we can say that are part of climate change. And so it's like, oh, okay, I get it. And I'm there's nothing wrong with me. And it actually feels good to recognize it and talk about it. And other people feel this too. So back to the original question, it usually is some form of fear, anxiety, some form of sadness or grief, and maybe some type of outrage or anger.
There's so much that we don't realize is affected by climate.
Yes. Yes.
Well, the next question we have is, what advice would you give someone feeling overwhelmed by climate news?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. I mean, I can relate to this personally, of wanting to stay on top of things, needing to be on top of things, and it doesn't take long before it's overwhelming. So one thing is to be really intentional about it, that you can stay informed without constantly, as it's sometimes called now, doom scrolling. right? Because one of the problems is that our journalism and news, well, first you have to find out where the accurate information is, but two, they skew toward headline news, the big stuff, the distressing stuff. And it takes a little more work to track down the positive news. Who are the people making change? Where is it happening? What are those statistics of the increase of the use of solar and wind and the lowering of the cost and the accessibility? The species that were on the brink of extinction that have bounced back. These are true stories due to conservation efforts. And so it requires not just going to the news source that you trust the most, but being measured about it. And sometimes there is a kind of a reactive part of us that if you start to recognize you've actually heard this story already or a couple of times, that's a strong clue to, okay, you're up to date, you're informed, and not to stay kind of pulled into that. And then to be really intentional, because you won't find it on mainstream news stations yet, about where the good news is happening. There are some journalists who are trying to um, make it more balanced and try and get it more inclusive, but it's not quite there yet.
Well, I think it's going back to school, right? The why, the what, the when, the how, right?
Yeah.
Ask those questions. Like when you're looking for research or you're looking to search the internet, ask those questions. Why do I feel this way? What is causing these emotions? Like kind of have that conversation with yourself. And I think that's why they teach us that in school at a young age is the why, what, why, when, how, and where. Now, with climate change, is there a place on Earth that we should be concerned about, that we should be watching and looking out for?
Oh, that's a hard question, because there are definitely areas being impacted more quickly than others, often what's referred to as the global south. So I'm aware of areas like, for example, in India and Pakistan, having very high levels of heat, some extreme floods. I mean, just to name these things, people can probably think of 5 other places that are experiencing this too. But there is concern that there will be areas that actually become unlivable due to the high levels of heat on a more sustained basis. So there's a whole area of study that's called climate migration, where if people are not able to, whatever it is, not enough water resources, too high of heat levels, too much frequency of flooding or wildfires, whatever it may be, that people may need to move and shift. The other thing that's pretty scary to track is that before I go there, I'll say, if you've been tracking also what's happening in Europe, they've had a really hot summer, quite a few wildfires. I was actually giving a talk in June in Poland, and it was a wonderful conference, and it had to do in part with psychology in service of the planet. But I actually came back a couple days early because it was over 100 degrees.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is just hitting a lot of areas. And then what a lot of scientists are worried about too, and I don't know enough about how to describe the science of why it's happening this way, but the Arctic, the polar caps are heating up quickly, which again would be surprising, sort of in the way that people haven't expected Canada. You've talked about living in Canada to have so many wildfires.
Yes.
We go back 15, 20 years and we sort of think of Canada as, this cool area, lots of trees. And in that sense, like people have been really surprised at the level of wildfires and the drying conditions that are creating creating.
Yeah, we have quite a few wildfires that are going on right now, especially up north where the trees are. Uh, so there's a lot going on up there. There's a couple of communities that we've lost as well. So, you mentioned the loss of a home through a fire, through flood and stuff like that. The wildfires, like all the animals, where are the animals going?
Mm, mm. Well, I think it's, again, kind of tragic to look at, but they're going where they can, right? And that's creating its own level of problems. Sometimes they're going into urban areas. Sometimes they can't shift, which is, creating conflicts, like whether it's bears or cougars or whatever it may be in areas that aren't used to that and don't know what to do with that. And, it's when we look at evolution and how animals adapt to environments, the problem is that the rate of change in our environment is happening so quickly that the animals are struggling to find where to be. But, to pull back and see the bird's eye view, there are changes in where different plants are growing, right? And where different trees, it's almost as if we could watch them move too at a slower pace. And the same with animals and the same with people. I mean, we're sort of all part of this living biosphere, and it's affecting us in a similar way.
Well, it is. It's affecting so much that people are not paying attention to. Like it's just a wildfire. It's not, because we're losing those animals. We're losing that food. We're losing the ecosystem. We're losing the fruits and vegetables that are being grown, like, in those areas. And then prices go up and the economy goes up, and it affects everything. So I'm really glad that we're having this conversation this afternoon, because climate change affects our life. It affects humanity, like you mentioned, Leslie.
Yes.
So we have some more questions that are coming in. The next one that came in is from Johnny, and it's, how did you work with Ask a Climate Therapist begin?
Thank you. So Ask a Climate Therapist is a new monthly column through an environmental newspaper called Grist. And they do excellent. In fact, it's a good thing to go to online for information and stories. Really good. And they've been around, I think, at least 25 years. And I had been writing. Ask a Climate Therapist is like Dear Abby. People have a chance to write in with their actual questions anonymously, and then I write a response. And of course, just like reading any type of advice column, there's often something in there of like, oh, I didn't ask that question, but that's been on my mind. And I just love that personally. It's one of my favorite things I do. I had been writing one for a Substack newsletter for someone called Britt Ray, a wonderful leader in climate emotions as well. And that sort of faded due to just a number of circumstances. So I'm like, ooh, this is such a good outlet and such a good service to people. Where can it live? So I reached out to Grist and said, what do you think about this? It's looking for a new home. And they picked it up, and we're off and running. So it's good for listeners just to know to check that out. You can send in your questions. There's a form to list your questions. You can be anonymous, and then, certain ones are chosen to go into print.
Oh, I like that. It's like kind of picking up the old newspaper, right? And reading, for years I wanted to do like a little tea time message, like in a column and stuff like that. I might do it still, but it gets the conversation started.
Yes.
So when you read something like a Dear Abby, or, it gives you that conversation starter, because especially if you're reading the newspaper with the people around you, then you can say, hey, how do you feel about this question? How do you feel about this answer?
Yes.
Just getting the conversation starting. That's what I love about Teatime, is we just get the conversation started. We never know where it's going or how we're going to serve it, but we just bring the conversation to the table. The next question we have for you is from Discover Connecticut. I appreciate how this conversation encourages awareness instead of fear. How can families help children process climate-related fears in healthy ways?
Yes, wonderful question. And I will just mention my kids' books because I basically took this on and created some guidelines. So I have a book called What to Do When Climate Change Scares You. And that's for ages around 6 through 8, 8 or 9. It varies a little bit based on the child. And then I have one for tweens called All the Feelings Under the Sun. And what both of these are, and I think in a while we'll talk about my adult book as well, they're this, what I sometimes call toggling, this back and forth between let's learn about this in an age appropriate way, because their kids are hearing about it anyway, and some are living through it. And then pausing, and there's art exercises and writing practices and nature activities, and a lot of, especially with the kids, how to bring it into ongoing family conversations. A little bit of guidelines for the caregivers or parents about, in certain ways, letting the child take the lead of what are their areas of curiosity, what are their worries, what do they love about nature, and ways to bring that into an ongoing, let's keep talking about this. I'm learning about it too. It matters to me. It matters to me what you're thinking and feeling. If I don't know the answer, let's go find out. And there's some natural ways to introduce it too. A lot of schools celebrate Earth Day, which is kind of an easy entry into that. And many, many now zoos, nature centers, parks have some kind of a educational conservation component. So that's also, it can just be a fun outing, and we're learning about this as we go. And often they will provide tips for how to make a difference. And again, it varies by area, but there are more and more family-oriented community groups and organizations that might have a cleanup day, or they might have a tree planting day, or a craft-oriented one that has to do with learning about your community and nature. So there's growing resources for how to do family involvement. And it's so important because I'll say quite compassionately that a lot of adults are distressed and are afraid of scaring their children. So they kind of back away from it. The danger in that is that, again, kids are overhearing a conversation, the news is on, they get some little snippet about a flood, and they go to bed wondering if their house is going to flood when it might be a state away.
Yeah.
And so to just create that open atmosphere for questions and conversation is essential.
Absolutely. Well, Leslie, before we run out of time, I want to get that book up. So let's talk about the book, and then I'll get to the rest of the questions that are coming in. Could you tell us a little bit about the book and explain the cover of the book for the audio listeners that are not seeing the book?
Okay, so this book is coming out this month, August 25th. It's called Transforming Climate Anxiety, a workbook for courage, clarity, and collective action. And it basically, I'm really thrilled about this book because it synthesizes so much of what I've been doing for the last 20 years. So like the children's books, it's educational about some of the questions that have been asked. What is happening in the world? What do scientists think? Where are the biggest impacts happening? Where are the people who are making a difference? But then it also is educational about how we feel about it. And it includes the climate emotions wheel that I mentioned. And then there are, it's like journaling prompts. There are actually lines in the books, but it could also be done, separately in a journal that take you through your own process of how to work with the thoughts and feelings you have, how to use your interests, talents, and resources to be part of change. So it, like the title says, it's not just about help me feel better. That certainly is essential to the book. But it's now that we can kind of face this honestly and we can ground ourselves and we can join with others, it's kind of like, come on, let's do this and let's find ways and ways that fit you and your lifestyle and your talents that can be part of this collective shift.
So, Leslie, are you having an early release for this book, or it comes out on August 25th?
It comes out on August 25th. I will say that on Goodreads, people who like to read might know about Goodreads, there's currently a free book giveaway. It's an easy thing to do. You just submit your name and I guess an email, and there's no cost. And there are going to be 10 print copies given away. The drawing happens August 20th. I believe they're going to follow up with a digital book giveaway because it is in a Kindle format and in print. And then there's a second site going to do something similar called Storygraph, and they're going to do a giveaway once the book comes out.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so that's
there is so much I'm learning, and so much that my listeners are learning. The next question we have for you came in from Citrus, and it's, what inspired you to create the APA guide for young people?
Okay, I'm just loving every question. So if you've been here from the start, I talked about my first climate-related book was for the mental health field. And that really pulled me into so many settings, including schools. And the American Psychological Association reached out to me and they said, we love this book you did. Can you do one for kids too? Kind of along the same lines. You know, there's so much good information here. And, you know, thankfully, the APA, the American Psychological Association, has their finger on the pulse of emerging mental health needs and shifts, and they recognize the need. And so, because I also work with children, I said I absolutely will. And I did a little bit of informal ground research. I talked to kids at schools in my area and, you know, did a lot of other things and translated it down and again into the age appropriate steps. But you know, what's so interesting about all of the age books is that it always is this blend of a certain amount of information, again, age related, and then what to do with it. And basically developing our emotional intelligence, you know, our emotional skillfulness. And while these books are oriented toward climate, I have to say that the benefits kind of spill out to whatever challenges we might be facing in life.
Well, Leslie, we have a question here from Lucy, and it has any experience with a client completely changed your perspective on resilience?
I don't know if this changed it exactly, but I would say it brought it to a deeper level, which is that I was already doing this work. I was already seeing clients, doing some writing. And a very close friend of mine, like in the category of, you know, my inner circle of friends, lost her home in a wildfire in Northern California. And it just became even more personal. It's a home that I've, you know, had dinners in, hung out, built our friendship in. So I was, you know, in her full journey and had a feeling of the way it impacted me differently than the way it does when I work with clients or community groups. And I suppose the change was maybe just a deeper resolve. You know, there's something about understanding something to our bones, right? To the soles of our feet. And it certainly renewed my commitment to wanting to do this work.
Well, Leslie, I want to get into your tea, because the tea you gave me was Feel Where Psychology Meets Planet. Understand the inner landscape is part of the deterrent, and act awareness ignites transformation. So tell me a little bit about this tea that you gave me.
Well, it's sort of a nice little summary of what we're talking about, which I'll say it this way. How we perceive each other, how we are with ourselves, with each other, with the natural world, affect how we treat it, right? So we treat each other either as understanding our relationship, our connection, our mutual influence, or we understand a tree as a living entity that provides shade and oxygen, and that how we breathe is connected to the tree, or we don't. And we see it as a commodity. And we need to use it, but we need to use it responsibly and with an understanding of reciprocity and the costs involved and what's asked of us as we draw on our resources. And so that's our inner terrain. That's our inner landscapes, is how our thought, our feeling, our perception, our degree of open-heartedness is so influential to the environment. And we don't have enough of it because obviously we've been harming it in a variety of ways. And then whatever's happening out there affects us, whether it's the beauty of a sunrise or whether it's the discomfort of a smoky sky. So it's really to understand there is no division. We can give it different words. We can call it our thoughts, our feelings, our body, and we can call it the outside. But they're always communicating and influencing each other, either in healthy ways or unhealthy ways. And we've got, I feel like we have some work to do there in growing up in our humanity to reawaken some of those natural impulses that sort of get schooled out of us or cultured out of us as we get kind of pulled into the more accomplishment, work, technology, whatever it may be. So that, I feel like that's the heart of what all this is to reestablish those connections. And if that's there between our internal life and our external one, we're going to have that natural impulse to act in a caring way, in a protective way.
So Leslie, what does social justice have to do with the climate psychology?
I'm glad you raised that. I know I said a little bit about it when it came to tree planting programs. But at the heart of it is that the people, and I'll speak globally, but it could be looked at within within the US or whatever as well, other countries, the people who've contributed the least to putting carbon in the atmosphere, which is what's creating this ripple of impacts, are the people who are often experiencing the most devastating consequences and have the least resources. And it's to understand that so that when programs come into place, when solutions are being brought forward, is it taking that into account? How to make things accessible, affordable, to the right areas, in the right ratio, and that there's, some people talk about it, we have an obligation or a debt to pay if we hold this globally. Because of that imbalance, and that we can do it as we look at solutions, and we can bring their participation and voices in as well. We don't want to just create something that may not be a match for a community, but to really understand the imbalance and then invite that involvement in solutions.
Absolutely. If everyone could learn one lesson about climate psychology, what would it be? Maybe it's to reiterate something we've said, which is absolutely all of us are unique, and that uniqueness has a role to play. We all can support someone or offer something or bring it into our workplace or our home life, or there's always a way to make the world a little bit better. And that in connecting with others, it not only helps us, but we can start to feel
that collective benefit that comes from that too.
So give me one word that defines hope for us today.
I'm going to say connection. You know, we've been talking about interconnectedness and relationships and community. So maybe that's the essence here.
So if I give you a forest or an ocean, which one are you picking?
I kind of like forest, even though I've always lived on a coast.
Sunset or sunrise?
Sunrise.
And what inspires you most days, Leslie?
I'm going to have to say connection again because really it's conversations like this. I've loved the questions coming in. I love that people have indicated that this is helpful. They're going to take something from this. Nothing could make me happier than that. And it fuels me. So I would have to say that connection too.
And Leslie, what's your final message to everybody today? And if they wanted to have you on their podcast or their shows or anything like that, where could they reach you?
Yes, thank you. I would love that. I make myself as available as time and energy allows. So please feel free to reach out. The easiest way is through my website, which is basically my name, Leslie Davenport, altogether.com, www.lesliedavenport.com.
And what's your final message to everybody today?
I think it's just gratitude. Gratitude that those of you watching, listening, participating. I mean, this is what it takes. This is where change happens. We're planting seeds. We're nourishing what's already begun to grow. So I'm thankful.
Well, I really enjoyed this conversation with you today, Leslie, and thank you for bringing this to the table because this is one I have not had. Thank you to the listeners out there who have tuned in and brought your questions. This is how we do it, right? We make a difference by showing up and by just asking questions. So, Leslie, what one final question from me, and it's: what legacy do you hope your work leaves for future generations?
that we do right now cross-generational connection and efforts so that the world and the future that our young people are glancing into has more hope, has more evidence of turning the tide in the correct direction. Because boy, do our young folks need that and want that. And that we were meant to do it together. So to lower the silos, to build the bridges, and bring the strengths of each generation to bear.
Well, thank you so much. I'm just going to do a quick recap of what today's tea time was, and we'll be back at 7 p.m. and we'll do this all over again, guys. What a thoughtful, grounding, and deeply necessary conversation we have shared today. Leslie, thank you for bringing your wisdom, compassion, and practical guidance to the tea time table. Today's conversation reminded us that climate anxiety is not simply fear about the weather or the environment. It can include grief for what has already been lost, concern for future generations, anger over delayed action, and a painful sense of helplessness when the problem feels too large to hold. Through transforming climate anxiety, you reminded us that we do not have to deny these emotions or allow them to consume us. We can acknowledge them, we can understand them, we can regulate them ourselves, and we can connect with others. We can choose action that are meaningful, sustainable, and rooted in our values. One of today's greatest takeaways is this: hope is not pretending everything will be fine. Hope is choosing to remain engaged because our actions still matter. Leslie, your work reminds us that emotional resilience is not separate from climate action. It is part of it. People who feel supported, connected, and grounded are better able to respond with courage rather than panic, compassion rather than blame, and persistence rather than exhaustion. As we close today's tea time, I would like to leave everyone with this thought. What is one action you can take that is small enough to sustain, meaningful enough to matter, and connect enough to remind you that you are not alone? No single person can carry the weight of the entire planet. Each of us can carry one piece of responsibility, join it with the efforts of others, and help create movements greater than ourselves. Leslie, thank you for reminding us that our concern can become care, our grief can deepen our connection, and our anxiety can be transformed into thoughtful actions. Until next time, continue caring, courageously, continue protecting your emotional well being, and continue serving real life tea, truth, experience, and awareness, one heart and one meaningful action at a time. And today's takeaway from Miss Liz is climate anxiety does not mean we are powerless. It means we care. When we meet with care, with emotional support, community, and purposeful actions, fear can become courage and concern can become a pathway towards meaningful change. And I'll see everybody at 7 p.m. and we'll do this all over again.